No country owns the world's oceans, but one nation has built a system to control them. With around 290 battle forces, a third of which are deployed at any given time, the US Navy projects power like no other. Right now, some of that power moves through the crowded, contested waters of the South China Sea. And here, distance is everything. The farther a ship is from home, the harder it is to keep it supplied, maintained, and ready. Even the most powerful navies feel it. And in a crisis, slow can mean defeat. War doesn't hand out participation prizes. So the United States came up with a workaround. Rather than send ships to a conflict or a region, you just keep them there. This is the doctrine of the Forward Deployed Naval Force, known as the FDNF. Instead of keeping the fleet in San Diego or Norfolk and rushing them to a war zone, the US parks ships on the doorsteps of its rivals. Permanent presence, immediate response. To manage this, the world is carved into specific zones of responsibility: the Atlantic and the Arctic, the Pacific, East and West, in the waters around the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, and Central and South America. And there's also one more domain where the battle you can't see takes place. That's cyber warfare. This setup forms an invisible barrier around the Eurasian landmass, but knowing the names of the fleets doesn't make them deadly. To understand that, you have to look at the core block, the Carrier Strike Group. It's a self-contained air force, powerful enough to level a small nation. The centerpiece is a Nimitz or Ford-class nuclear carrier. It houses an air wing of over 70 aircraft, including FA-18 Super Hornets and F-35C Lightning IIs. Thanks to its importance, the carrier never moves alone. Flanking it is at least one Ticonderoga-class cruiser. Its job is air defense coordination, tracking hundreds of targets at once to make sure nothing touches the carrier. Surrounding them are 2 or 3 Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers. They handle anti-submarine warfare and missile defense. And lurking under the waves is a nuclear attack submarine, scouting the route ahead for enemy threats. All in all, it's a seagoing fortress. When a crisis erupts, the first question isn't who's involved, it's where are the carriers? Their location tells you everything. Take the US 7th Fleet, headquartered in Yokosuka, Japan. This is the front line. The USS George Washington is the only US carrier permanently homeported outside the United States, along with its escort ships like the USS Mustin and USS Antietam. It doesn't just visit the East China Sea, it lives there. Data from the US Naval Institute shows that these forward-deployed units log over 100,000 sailing hours annually, operating the typhoon corridors of the Pacific and the contested waters of the South China Sea. This solves any reaction time problem. By the time a customized response force could sail from California to Taiwan, that war would be over. The FDNF ensures that the response is instantaneous. But presence isn't just about escalating conflict, it's about political influence. When a US carrier docks in Vietnam or the Philippines, it's more than just a visit. It's a signal. A defense treaty isn't just words on a piece of paper. The security guarantee is pretty real, and it's physical. On the flip side, the Navy conducts freedom of navigation operations known as FONOPs. This means sailing a destroyer straight through waters that nations like China claim as their own, specifically the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea again. And it's about the optics. It proves that no single nation owns the ocean. By keeping roughly 30% of its fleet deployed at all times, the US Navy ensures the shared oceans stay open and navigable. Open waterways can be deceiving, and that brings us to choke points. Oh, and if you like these US deep dives, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm somehow describing global maritime dominance without a single admiral shouting at me. Anyway, maritime geography is not uniform. Global trade doesn't flow freely across every mile of ocean. It usually funnels through a handful of narrow passages. The Strait of Hormuz, the Strait of Malacca, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal. Control these choke points and you rule the world's flow of power and trade. And the US Navy has turned that into a science. Today, over 80% of global trade moves by sea. The stability of these routes underpins everything from US energy prices to stock market confidence. Naval dominance isn't just military leverage, it's economic gatekeeping. A key choke point in the world right now is the Bab al-Mandeb. Known as the Gate of Tears, this strait connects the Indian Ocean to the Suez Canal. If you close this gate, ships can't reach the Mediterranean. The only other route is around Africa. For years, Houthi rebels in Yemen have been targeting this vital corridor with anti-ship ballistic missiles and drones. In response, the US launched Operation Prosperity Guardian. Very American. Destroyers like the USS Laboon and USS Mason positioned themselves between drones and vulnerable container ships. This exposes the difference in naval power. The Houthis deploy drones costing around $20,000, while the Navy shoots them down with SM-2 missiles costing $2 million each. It's not an ideal exchange rate, and kind of the worst scenario for a choke point. It forces the Navy into a protective position in a confined space. In 2017, the USS John S. McCain collided with a merchant vessel near the Strait of Malacca, simply because the waters were too crowded to navigate safely. But if you can guarantee safe passage through these 5 geographic points, you stabilize the world markets. And if you deny passage, you can cripple a country. But parking a ship in the middle of the ocean brings its own problems. There's a saying in some military circles: amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. And it's a vital lesson. No nation on Earth can match the United States' ability to keep a fleet fed, fueled, and armed no matter where they are. That logistical capability doesn't just sustain warships, it sustains the credibility of US trade protection worldwide. During high-tempo flight operations, an air wing can burn through 400,000 gallons of jet fuel per day. The crew of 5,000 sailors consumes tons of food. The ammo stores need to be restocked with thousands of pounds of precision ordnance. If a carrier has to return to port to resupply, it stops being a weapon. It leaves a dangerous gap in the line, and at that point, it's just a very expensive parking spot. The US Navy solves this with the underway replenishment, known as UNREP. A supply ship pulls alongside the carrier, both moving at 12 to 15 knots and just 160 feet apart. In the middle of the ocean, often in heavy seas, they fire shot lines across the gap. Rigged tensions span wires and transfer fuel hoses and pallets of ordnance. They do this at night, under radio silence. This is what allows the US Navy to turn a carrier group into a constant threat. In 2020, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower spent 206 consecutive days at sea. For 7 months, it remained fully combat effective because the logistics train came to it. No other navy can do this at this scale. While the Soviet Union built a navy to defend their coast, the US built a navy for sea control, and that requires staying power. But this is also its weak spot. Today, the US Navy's logistical fleet is a shadow of its former glory. The average age of the Ready Reserve Force is over 45 years. In a conflict with China, these unarmed supply ships would be the primary targets. China doesn't need to sink a carrier, they just need to sink the oilers. The logistics chain is the vulnerable part of the American giant. Naval planners are currently scrambling to boost it, but you can't build a new support fleet overnight. It's a race against time, and one they hope they can win. But there's more to just being at sea indefinitely. In the age of sail, a lookout in the crow's nest could see maybe 12 miles on a clear day. Today, the fleets see far beyond the horizon. Planes sweep the skies, ships watch the waves, satellites scan the oceans. Every platform feeds information into one shared picture, letting commanders track movement, see threats, and respond before danger reaches them. A missile could appear over the horizon, unseen by the ship below, yet the fleet already knows it's coming. Sensors in the air, on sea, and even in space feed the data to the right place at the right time. The ships act together, as if connected by a single mind. The result isn't just defense, it's situational awareness. The fleet can act sooner, strike farther, and control the space around it without ever exposing itself. But the game continues to change. Hypersonic missiles can travel at Mach 5, over 3,800 miles an hour. That's reduced reaction time from minutes to seconds. And that means modern solutions. The Navy is currently implementing Project Overmatch, an AI-driven initiative to automate the sorting of targets. Instead of relying on human reaction, the network will decide what to shoot. With the surface, logistics, and airwaves covered, the single most decisive advantage the United States holds is not visible. It's lurking hundreds of feet beneath the surface. This is the one domain where the United States still holds a clear edge. If aircraft carriers are the show of force, submarines are the hidden threat. In a full-scale conflict with an adversary like China, surface ships are vulnerable. They can be tracked by satellites. They can be targeted by carrier-killer missiles. But the deep ocean remains the one domain where stealth still rules. The U.S. Navy's submarine force is unique in the world for one specific engineering reason. It's 100% nuclear. Most nations, including Russia and China, operate mixed fleets. They have some nuclear boats, but they rely heavily on diesel-electric submarines. A diesel sub is quiet, but it has a weakness. It has to surface to recharge its batteries. A U.S. Virginia-class fast-attack submarine can travel thousands of miles at high speed without surfacing. It's almost entirely self-sufficient. It creates its own oxygen by electrolyzing seawater. It distills its own drinking water. The only limit is the amount of food they can carry. Typically, that's about 90 days of complete invisibility. To maintain dominance, the US uses the ocean's thermal layers. The ocean is layered by temperature. Sound waves bend when they hit these temperature changes. A US commander can hide his boat beneath a thermal layer, using the temperature difference to bounce enemy sonar pings away. He disappears. This underwater dominance is split into two distinct missions. First, the Hunter Killers, or SSNs. These are the Los Angeles, the Seawolf, and Virginia-class boats. They hunt enemy submarines and sink them before they can threaten the carriers. But they're also strike platforms. They carry Tomahawk cruise missiles. They can strike targets 1,000 miles inland without ever surfacing. In the opening minutes of Operation Odyssey Dawn in Libya in 2011, it wasn't an aircraft carrier that kicked down the door. It was the USS Florida, a guided missile submarine. It fired over 90 cruise missiles in single quick shots. It wiped out the Libyan air defense network before they knew the war had started. And second, there are the missile subs, or SSBNs. These are the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines. At any given moment, several of these are patrolling the deepest parts of the ocean, relying on their stealth to stay hidden. Each carries up to 20 Trident II D5 missiles. Just one of these submarines carries enough nuclear firepower to level every major city in a mid-sized nation. Their existence ensures that no matter how hard an enemy strikes the US mainland, the retaliation will be absolute. The US has a fleet of around 60 subs. That pressure freezes maritime operations globally. When you combine these 5 levers, presence, choke points, logistics, information, and undersea control, you get a system of complete control. This enables the US to contain conflicts. It allows them to disrupt supplies. It allows them to shape the outcome before the first shot is fired. Think back on the Cold War era. The US Navy kept a strong presence in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. They controlled key choke points like the GI-UK Gap. Their forward ships and better info let them track Soviet subs early, and good supplies meant they could stay out longer than the Soviets ever could. In the 1991 Persian Gulf War, US naval forces were already deployed to the Middle East as part of Operation Desert Shield. These forces secured critical routes and allowed the rapid buildup of coalition troops. Supplies, reinforcements, and firepower could reach the front lines without delay. Subs cleared out dangers underwater. This let the Navy support the coalition air campaign and ground offensive by effectively shutting down the Iraqi Navy. At this point, it might seem like the US Navy is nigh invincible, but it's not. The system was built for a different era, a world where the US had no rival. That world is gone. The US naval machine is facing 4 existential threats that money can't easily fix. The most immediate crisis facing the US Navy isn't tactical, it's actually industrial. In the 1980s, under the Reagan administration, the US fleet peaked at nearly 600 ships. It was a giant. Today, the battle force hovers around 290 ships. Meanwhile, the People's Liberation Army Navy of China has grown. They've surpassed the US in hull count, operating over 370 battle force ships. But the raw numbers mask the real story. The problem isn't just the ships, it's the shipyards. China is the world's shipbuilder. In a single year, Chinese shipyards launch more tonnage than the United States produces in 3. They operate on a war footing, 24/7. They have a massive commercial shipbuilding sector that can instantly pivot to military production. In contrast, the US shipbuilding industrial base has atrophied. During the Cold War, the US had dozens of public and private shipyards capable of building complex warships. Today, that number has collapsed. There are only a handful of dry docks in North America capable of building or repairing nuclear carriers. This creates a significant industrial bottleneck. In a high-intensity naval war, ships get damaged. If a US carrier takes a missile hit, it has to limp back to one of the very few dry docks available. It could be out of the fight for years. If a Chinese carrier gets hit, they have dozens of commercial shipyards ready to fix it. They can patch it up and send it back out in months. In a war of attrition, the side that can replace its losses faster usually wins. For the first time in a century, the United States has lost that advantage. China has studied the American playbook. They know the US has blue water superiority, so they decided to rig the game. They invested billions into a strategy known as Anti-Access Area Denial, or A2AD. The logic is pretty simple. Don't fight the carrier, eliminate the carrier before it gets to the fight. China has built a huge arsenal of land-based ballistic missiles known as carrier killers. These aren't standard cruise missiles. They're ballistic missiles capable of hitting a moving target 2,000 miles away. They launch into the edge of space and come screaming down at hypersonic speeds. This creates a death zone extending thousands of miles from the Chinese coast. In order to conduct combat sorties over Taiwan, a US carrier would have to sail directly inside the range of these missiles. This neutralizes the US presence mentioned earlier. If the carriers stay outside the death zone, their jets don't have the range to reach the target. If they go inside, they risk being targeted themselves. And then there's the manpower. The US Navy is currently facing its worst recruiting shortfall in decades. Americans are less interested in military service. The private sector pays better. The physical standards are also disqualifying more applicants than ever before. The result is that ships are deploying undermanned. And it's not just an HR problem, it's a safety crisis. When a ship is short-staffed, the remaining sailors have to work longer shifts, leading to burnout, fatigue, and fatal mistakes. And the last threat is the water itself. Climate change is reshaping naval operations in a way that is rarely discussed. The world's largest naval base, Naval Station Norfolk in Virginia, is sinking. Rising sea levels and land subsidence mean the base floods regularly. According to estimates, the backlog of repairs for infrastructure damage is over $1.8 billion. The Navy is spending money raising piers and hardening power grids, money that should be spent on missiles and ships. In the Pacific, typhoons are becoming more intense. This disrupts logistics. You can't resupply and refuel in a Category 5 storm. Simultaneously, the supply chain for the weapons themselves is vulnerable. The most advanced US radars and missiles rely on high-end microchips. The vast majority of these chips are manufactured in Taiwan. This is the ultimate irony. The US Navy needs chips to defend Taiwan, but it needs Taiwan to get the chips. In war games conducted by RAND in 2023, simulations showed that if China blockaded Taiwan, the US defense industrial base would run out of critical components within weeks. This creates a use-it-or-lose-it dilemma, and the admirals know this. Recognizing these vulnerabilities, the Navy is undergoing its most radical transformation since the invention of the aircraft carrier. It's called Distributed Maritime Operations, or DMO. The days of the massive carrier strike group huddle are ending. DMO is the strategy of scattering the fleet. Instead of presenting one big target, the Navy wants to present 1,000 small ones. A destroyer goes here, here, a frigate goes there, a marine unit sets up a mobile missile battery on a tiny rock in the Philippines. By spreading out, they force the enemy to waste millions of dollars in surveillance assets trying to find them. They dilute the enemy's firepower. But to make this work, the Navy needs numbers. So the Department of Defense has launched the Replicator Initiative, a program to develop and field a number of autonomous platforms across land, sea, and air. Imagine a future where unmanned surface vessels, or USVs, extend the US Navy's reach and presence. Some USVs are being developed with advanced sensors that could contribute to detecting submarines, and future, larger classes will carry missile payloads. This shifts the cost curve. Right now, if China fires a $2 million missile at a $13 billion aircraft carrier, China wins the economic exchange. But if China fires a $2 million missile at a $2 million drone boat, it's just hardware. Under the waves, the Navy is developing the Orca XL UUV, or Extra Large Unmanned Undersea Vehicle. This is a drone submarine that can autonomously lay minefields in enemy harbors. It can sit on the ocean floor for listening and waiting. This is the answer to the A2AD bubble. You don't send a carrier into the death zone, you send the drones. But the US is realizing it can't go it alone. It's doubling down on its alliances to create strategic depth. The AUK-US pact between Australia, the UK, and the US is the biggest shift in Pacific power in decades. The US is sharing its nuclear propulsion technology with Australia. The goal is to give Australia its own fleet of nuclear-powered attack submarines. And this is a nightmare for Beijing. Currently, Chinese planners only have to worry about US subs coming from Guam or Hawaii. Soon, they'll have to worry about high-end nuclear subs launching from Perth, deep in the southern hemisphere. For decades, the US Navy ruled the world's oceans. That dominance was built in an era without a peer naval competitor. Today, that assumption no longer holds. The Stars and Stripes may no longer dominate every sea. In modern naval warfare, standing still isn't safe, and it can mean being sunk. The US must adapt or risk falling behind. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MapPack.